If you look at a postcard of the Isle of Bute in Scotland, nothing about it suggests horror. Ferries glide across the water, little guest houses line the harbor, kids ride their bikes along the seafront, while grandparents sit on benches with ice cream. It is the kind of place people move to when they are tired of big city chaos and want their children to grow up somewhere that feels safe. On the morning of July 20, 2018, that illusion died before the sun had fully risen. Inside a modest flat in the town of Rothesay, grandfather Alesha MacPhail woke up early for work. He followed the same routine he always did when his granddaughter was visiting. Before coffee, before getting dressed, he went to check on 6-year-old Alesha. Her bed should have looked exactly the way he left it a few hours earlier. Small shape under the blanket, cartoons still whispering from the TV, the kind of scene that melts a grandparent on sight. Instead, when he opened the door, the bed was empty. No little girl asleep, no pile of cushions on the floor, no blanket dragged halfway across the room. At first he did what any rational adult would do. He told himself she probably got up to use the bathroom. Maybe she went to the living room. Maybe she had crawled into her dad's bed in the night like kids sometimes do. Those first few minutes were calm. Then he checked the bathroom, then the living room, then her dad's room, then the kitchen. The calm cracked. Within moments, the whole flat was awake. Her grandmother Angela, her father Robert, his girlfriend Tony. They were all calling her name, opening every door, looking under beds, searching places she absolutely should not have been, just in case. Her scooter and bike were still in the garden. Her shoes were inside. The front door was shut, but like many doors on that island, it had not been locked overnight. There were no signs of a struggle, nothing broken, no loud noise anyone remembered. It was like she had simply been erased. At 6:23 a.m., with no more excuses left and terror building, the family called the police. In a small community, one missing child call hits like a shockwave. Officers began checking streets and nearby paths. Neighbors stepped outside in pajamas. Phones lit up. Angela posted on Facebook that her granddaughter was missing. That Facebook post, not a phone call, is how Alesha's mother on the mainland found out that her daughter was gone. While most people were just having their first cup of coffee, the Isle of Bute had already moved from sleepy to sirens. More officers arrived from off the island. The Coast Guard was alerted. A helicopter went up, sweeping the coastline. Locals searched beaches, parks, and alleys. It was still early enough to hope. People told each other she was probably hiding somewhere, maybe got lost and fell asleep. For almost 3 hours there was that tiny bit of optimism. It did not last. Around 9 a.m., a man walking his usual route near the ruins of the old Isle of Bute Hydropathic Hotel noticed something in the grass near a wooded area. The hotel had been abandoned for years. Windows smashed, walls crumbling, weeds taller than most people. He moved closer. On the overgrown grounds of that dead building, he saw the body of a little girl. The search ended on the spot. The crime scene began. Officers who had been hoping to find a frightened but alive 6-year-old suddenly found themselves standing over a child whose life had been taken with extreme violence. That kind of scene stays with you. Several of them would later talk about how that day never really left their heads. The island was no longer just looking for a missing girl. It was now hunting for a killer. Whoever had done this had somehow walked into a family home in the middle of the night, past 4 sleeping adults, picked up a sleeping child, carried her out into the dark, and left her in the shadow of a ruined hotel. And the person who finally put a name to that faceless predator would not be a detective or a neighbor. It would be his own mother. Before she became a headline, Alesha MacPhail was just a kid who loved YouTube, balloons, and Scottish dancing. She was born on October 23, 2011, in Airdrie near Glasgow. Her parents, Georgina and Robert, were young and hopeful when she arrived. The first months of her life looked like they might follow the typical family picture. Reality was more complicated. By the time Alesha was 3 months old, her parents had separated. A lot of stories stopped there and jumped straight into conflict. In this case, there was still contact. Georgina had main custody on the mainland, but Robert and his parents stayed in Alesha's life. They lived on the Isle of Bute, a ferry ride away, and Alesha traveled back and forth for visits and holidays. Those trips to the island became part of her routine. Her grandparents' 3-bedroom flat in Rothesay was not fancy, but she had her own space there, her own things, her own little rituals. Everyone on that side of the family doted on her. Walks on the seafront, the local park, the pool, trips to Ettrick Bay, a wide-open beach that kids adore. If it rained too much, which in Scotland is most days, she watched TV or YouTube with her dad's family. That is where another part of her personality showed up. She did not just watch videos, she wanted to make them. Georgina encouraged that side of her. At home in Airdrie, she helped her daughter record simple clips. One of the videos that circulated later was of Alesha in front of a camera talking proudly about pasta. She is so serious and so small. She explains what pasta is, why she likes it, and then tells imaginary viewers to give the video a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and to subscribe. You can hear it in her voice. She really believes she could grow a channel one day. Her teacher, a woman named Wendy, later described her as a perfectionist with her writing and someone who loved to read. She wanted to get things right, but she was never harsh or withdrawn. Other kids liked her. She walked into class with a smile that teachers actually remember years later, which says a lot. When school ended for the summer of 2018, nobody believed they were seeing her for the last time. She walked out of the classroom toward a vacation that was supposed to be filled with beaches and late bedtimes. On June 28th, she headed to the island to stay for 3 weeks with her dad, his girlfriend Tony, and her grandparents. She arrived, full of energy, and immediately wanted to go to her Scottish dancing class. It had already finished for the season, which disappointed her, but her grandparents were not about to let her first day be boring, so they took her to Ettrick Bay instead. Sand, waves, that perfect first day of holiday feeling. The next days were busy. One of the biggest highlights was the island's gala day. Her grandfather remembered the way she threw herself into the rides, laughing and screaming, and then running back for another turn. No phone screens, no drama, just a little girl soaking up every bit of fun she could. On July 1st, a few days into her visit, she was supposed to travel back with her grandfather to the mainland for a friend's birthday party. They ended up running late, but the party was still going, and one of Alesha's friends invited her to stay. She did not even know the birthday girl very well, but she blended in easily. Callum's final happy memory of her comes from that drive back after the party. She sat behind him in the car with a balloon in her hand and spent the entire 55-mile journey gently tapping the back of his head with it, annoying and hilarious at the same time. When they got back to Bute and stepped out near the beach, she tried to bop him again, lost her grip, and the balloon took off down the shore and popped. She ran after it, laughing. If you talk to grandparents who have lost a grandchild, they usually cling to one ordinary little memory like that. Not a big event, not Christmas or birthdays, just a silly normal moment that suddenly becomes priceless. That balloon moment was his. That night they picked up Robert and Tony, grabbed groceries, went home, made dinner, and ate together. It was a noisy, regular family evening. Sometime around 10, Alesha was tucked into bed in a small room, cartoons on the screen helping her drift off. About half an hour later, she got up and ran into her grandparents' bedroom just to give them one more goodnight hug and kiss. "Good night, Grandpa." There is something almost cruel about how sweet that final interaction was. There was no way for them to know that those words would echo in their heads for the rest of their lives. By 11, everyone assumed she was asleep. By 6, Callum walked into an empty room, and somewhere else on that island, another young person was just waking up from a completely different night. A teenager who also talked to a camera about subscribers, who chased views and validation online. He was about to become the central figure in one of the darkest cases Scotland had seen in decades. Aaron Campbell did not grow up looking like a textbook monster. That may be part of what makes this case so unsettling. He was born on May 7, 2002, in Shrewsbury, England. When he was still a child, his family moved north to the Isle of Bute. From the outside, they looked like any other family who had chosen that island life. Quieter streets, slower pace, a better place for kids. Inside the home, things were less simple. His father worked in the oil industry and was gone for long stretches. His relationship with his mother, Jeanette, was complicated. There are reports of emotional friction and heavy drinking in the house, but not everyone agrees on the details. What is clear is that the atmosphere was not always calm. Like millions of teenagers worldwide, Aaron found escape and identity on the internet. In 2014, he started his own YouTube channel. At first, it was mostly gaming content, then parkour clips, then casual vlogs where he talked directly into the camera about his subscriber count and where he wanted the channel to go. He joked about wanting as many subscribers as massive creators like PewDiePie. He also knew that it was hard to get noticed and that every single person who clicked subscribe mattered. On camera, he sounded like any other kid with a headset and big dreams. Offline, his interests grew darker. In 2017, during a chat with his girlfriend about a true crime documentary, he made a comment that would later haunt everyone who heard it. He said maybe one day there would be a documentary about him, not because he wanted to produce one, because he was fantasizing about committing an extreme violent act. Friends brushed it off as edgy, uncomfortable humor. Dark jokes are everywhere online. The difference here is that he meant it. According to his own later confession to a psychologist, he had been thinking about doing something extra for about a year, something that would make him feel powerful, something that would be remembered. At the same time, he was partying more, drinking, using drugs, hanging out with people who could supply those substances on a small island where everyone eventually meets everyone. That is how he crossed paths with Alesha's father, who was involved in low-level dealing, and with Tony, his girlfriend. Aaron bought from them. At some point, he felt cheated. He believed he had received poor-quality drugs, refused to pay a small debt, and tension brewed. For a while, there was no direct confrontation, just bad blood in a tiny community. On June 28th, the same day Alesha arrived on the island for her holiday, Aaron almost ran into her and her grandparents in town. It was one of those near collisions that mean nothing in the moment. Looking back, it feels like the story circling in on itself. That day, he also came up with a simple plan: host a party. On July 1st, his family's large 7-bedroom house filled with about 15 teenagers. There was alcohol, there were drugs, there was music, and laughing, and that reckless confidence that comes from feeling untouchable at 16. Aaron drank heavily and split a bottle with a friend. For most of the night, he seemed to be having fun. Later, he described it as a good time, but as the hours passed, his mood shifted. He argued with his mother. The energy in the house turned sharper. Around 12:30 a.m. on July 12th, most of the guests left. The noise faded. The big house went quiet. One friend came back briefly to pick up a forgotten bag. He found Aaron in a dark, agitated mood and tried to cheer him up. Eventually, Aaron told him that he was going to grab something and then go to bed. The friend believed him and went home. Aaron did not go to bed. He started trying to score more drugs instead. He messaged multiple people, including Tony. He considered contacting Robert directly but decided not to because of the unresolved debt. Somewhere in that restless, frustrated search, his focus switched. He had stolen from Robert before. He knew the house. He knew they kept drugs there. In his own story later, he claimed his first idea was to rob him again. He went to the kitchen, picked up a knife, and slipped out of the house into the dark. Security cameras around Rothesay later showed him at 1:54 a.m., small and hooded, walking toward the area where the MacPhail family lived. When he reached their building, he found exactly what made this case so hard for locals to accept afterwards. The front door was unlocked. He walked in. Inside, 4 adults were asleep: Alesha's father, his girlfriend, her grandparents. The flat was quiet. No one stirred when he came through the door. He moved through the flat, supposedly at first looking for drugs. Then he saw the small bedroom near the front of the flat, Alesha's room. She was lying in bed, cartoons still playing, completely unaware that anything was wrong. This is the moment where every parent and grandparent who hears this story feels physically sick. You want to rewrite it? You want him to walk back out, shut the door, and go home. He did not. Instead of leaving, he picked her up. He carried a sleeping 6-year-old girl out of a family home, past everyone who loved her, and stepped back into the night. In the cold air, she started to wake up. She did not scream. She asked who he was and where they were going. He told her he was a friend of her dad and that he was taking her home. When she said she was cold, he took off his jacket and put it around her shoulders. It sounds almost gentle until you remember what came next. That jacket was not kindness. It was a tool to keep her calm. She was 6, half asleep, and used to trusting adults around her, so she walked with him. They moved along the shore for around half an hour. At some point, he got rid of the knife near the water. A home security camera captured a brief image of them walking together. Their destination was the abandoned Isle of Bute hydropathic hotel. It was far enough from houses to feel isolated, full of trees and hiding places, exactly what someone with violent fantasies would be looking for. What happened there was so brutal that even experienced forensic experts were shaken. We cannot go into those details here, but the injuries were severe and the violence ended her life. When it was over, he left her on the ground and headed back toward the coast. Cameras near his home recorded him at 3:35 a.m. climbing over a wall. About 10 minutes later, he came back out, now wearing only shorts and carrying the rest of his clothes. He went down toward the water, stayed there for several minutes, and returned without the clothes. Investigators later concluded he had thrown them into the sea to try to destroy evidence. 6 minutes after that, he left again, now in fresh clothing and carrying something that looked like a flashlight. At 4:07 a.m., he returned for the final time. By the time the sun started to lift over the island, Alesha was lying in the shadow of the abandoned hotel, and her grandfather was only an hour away from opening her bedroom door to a nightmare. Once Alesha's body was found, the investigation shifted to maximum speed. Police Scotland flooded the island with officers. Forensic teams worked from multiple directions at once: the hotel grounds, the shoreline, the MacPhail flat, and any place that might hold a clue. Streets were cordoned off. People were interviewed. The island quickly felt like a crime scene instead of a vacation spot. While all of this was unfolding, Tony reached out to Aaron by text. She knew he had been trying to get drugs earlier that night. Now the girl who had been staying in her home was missing. At 9:01 a.m., he finally replied that it did not matter anymore. When she told him the police and a helicopter were searching, he wrote back something casual, like he thought the girl would not have gone far. What he did not know at that moment was that his mother had already taken a step he would never forgive. Jeanette had access to CCTV footage from around their house. When the news about a missing girl spread, she checked the recordings from the night. What she saw was her son, running in and out of the house in the small hours of the morning, climbing walls, carrying clothes. It did not look like someone who went to bed after a party. She confronted him. She asked him what he had been doing, whether he had anything to do with the disappearance. He denied everything. He told her he was innocent. He said he had no idea what had happened. She warned him that the police would look at DNA and that any lie would not survive forensic testing. He kept denying, calm, flat. So she did what a lot of parents say they would do, but very few ever have to prove. She took the footage to the police herself. At first, investigators treated Aaron as a potential witness. He was brought in for questioning. He was polite, spoke clearly, did not show obvious panic. If you watch enough interrogations online, you start to expect sweating, shaking, or explosive anger. He did none of that in the first interview. But quietly, in the background, the evidence started stacking up. DNA from the crime scene matched him. Traces on Alesha's body matched him. Footprints and other physical signs placed him on the route between the MacPhail flat and the old hotel. His phone data showed suspicious gaps in activity. His search history showed that the day after the murder, he had been looking up forensic procedures. On top of that, he had sent a Snapchat picture to a group chat of friends. In it, he was pointing at himself in a mirror with a single word written on the image: criminal. If this were fiction, that detail would feel too on the nose. In real life, it was another tiny piece of a very ugly puzzle. 2 days after the murder, on July 4th, the police called him back in, this time as a suspect. His tone shifted. He was less open, more evasive, but he still tried to explain away each piece of evidence. Eventually, prosecutors charged him with abduction, sexual assault, and murder. Because he was 16, his name was initially kept out of the media. Scottish law usually protects juvenile offenders from being publicly named. But in this case, the judge later agreed that revealing his identity was in the public interest. The community already knew the story. Now they would know the face. In court, Aaron pleaded not guilty. He used a legal tactic called a special defense of incrimination. In plain language, he tried to pin the entire crime on someone else. He claimed that Tony, his drug contact and Robert's girlfriend, was the one who had killed Alesha. He took the stand and told a long, detailed story about having a secret relationship with her in a garage that night. According to him, she had attacked the girl and then planted his DNA on her to frame him out of jealousy and spite. For about 2 hours, the jury watched him calmly answer questions, weaving his narrative. A reporter in the courtroom described him as controlled and almost detached, like he was performing in a school debate instead of facing a life sentence. The problem for him was simple. The evidence did not bend enough to make his story fit. After hearing all the testimony and seeing all the forensic results, the jury left to deliberate. They were gone for around 3 hours. On February 21, 2019, they came back into the courtroom and found Aaron Campbell guilty on all major counts. He showed almost no reaction as the verdict was read. Sentencing was postponed so that the court could receive psychological evaluations. During that period, in a private session with a consultant forensic psychologist, Aaron finally dropped the performance. He admitted what he had done. He talked about his long-standing fantasies of committing serious harm. He described how he had gone into the flat, taken Alesha from her bed, walked her to the hotel grounds, and killed her. According to the psychologist, he also said it had taken all his effort not to laugh during the trial. The report painted a picture of a teenager with severe antisocial traits, a fixation on harming vulnerable people, and almost no genuine remorse. The judge initially sentenced him to life imprisonment, with a minimum of 27 years before he could even apply for parole. Later that year, on appeal, the minimum term was reduced to 24 years on the grounds that 27 years was a starting point more suited to an adult than a 16-year-old. For Alesha's family, that argument about 3 extra years on paper did not change anything. They still had an empty bed, a silent seat at the table, a last text message or last school drawing that suddenly meant everything. On the Isle of Bute, people struggled with the idea that the danger had not come from a stranger off a passing ferry, but from a teenager who had grown up among them, a boy with a YouTube channel and a friend group, someone you might have walked past in the shop without a second thought. In prison, Aaron quickly became a target because of the nature of his crime. Reports surfaced in 2019 and 2022 of him being attacked by other inmates. He became so afraid of being assaulted that he barely left his cell. No one in his family visited him after his name went public. His mother, already hated by some locals simply for being his parent, stayed away out of fear for her own safety. It is easy to make this story all about him, but this case is not really his story. It is hers. A little girl who wanted to talk about pasta on camera, who wanted subscribers and thumbnails and silly kid videos, who loved balloons and rides and hugging her grandparents goodnight. If you are still here at the end of this video, I want to know what you think. Was the reduced sentence fair for a teenager with that level of planning and cruelty? What do you think about his mother walking into a police station with evidence against her own son? And what does justice even look like in a case where nothing brings back a 6-year-old child? Let me know in the comments. And for Alesha, if you can take 1 second to hug someone you love a little tighter tonight.